Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start with actually a round of applause to Jane and Dan for putting this together. Thank you, guys. Such a terrific event. All right, just a quick intro. I know I stand between you and lunch, so I'll make this as quick as possible. Let's just run through it. My name is Sinan Eren. I'm the VP of Zero Trust Security at Barracuda. Today, as just Dan briefly touched, we'll be talking about Zero Trust, right? What Zero Trust is as a concept, its principles, its evolution and history over the last 20 years. It's been around for a while, actually, right? And how does identity fit into Zero Trust? What is a simple roadmap for a successful Zero Trust initiative and implementation? We'll cover that. And how to prepare for it. And finally, the most important, I will say, we'll be covering the use cases. All right, so let's talk about Zero Trust. You hear this all the time, but I do actually want to take an interesting detour here. Let's talk about what it is not, okay? Zero Trust, unfortunately, become a suitcase word, meaning that vendors tend to stuff any meaning they wish into it, right? Some vendors, we have a lot of interesting, nice colleagues out there. We're all guilty of this. When Zero Trust become quite a popular terminology in our industry, from backup to email security, we started to stuff more meaning and more coverage into it. But today, hopefully, I'll try to help demystify what Zero Trust at the core means. And again, just to mention one last time what it is not, this old analogy goes back to about 2,000 years. 5 blind men in the desert run into an elephant. And every one of them approached the elephant from a different angle, and they grabbed something, right? And they described what the elephant is based on that. Oh, if it's a trunk, it's a snake. If it's the leg, it's a palm tree, right? So unfortunately, this is what Zero Trust turned out to be in our industry at the moment. Every vendor, whatever is their core competency, tries to define Zero Trust around those terms, right? If it's email, if it's backup, if it's network, everybody kind of, twists and starts to fit meaning into Zero Trust based on their unique angle. So, but what in reality is Zero Trust is moving inherent trust to explicit trust through continuous authentication and authorization of your users and their devices. We'll break it down. I know it sounds a technical definition, inherent trust to explicit trust. What do we mean by that? But in the long run, I think it makes a ton of sense to visualize it as who can access to what, when, given what conditions. I would say that's kind of the best, shortest way to coin the essence of the concept and the principle. And we'll break it down further. I know you heard other terminology around Zero Trust, like Zero Trust Network Access, right? It's also very popular. You hear it in the context of VPN replacement a lot. Well, again, it's just a Gartner coined term, another acronym, to operationalize the Zero Trust principle at the network level to control access to your enterprise, your company resources. But at the core, it's all Zero Trust, taking a network-centric view. Right, okay. So this is the slide that I mentioned. We'll be talking a little bit about its history, its evolution. It's been around, Zero Trust as a concept has been around for 20 years. Most of you will remember in the early days, in the 2000s, we have the NAC, network access control. It has its roots in network access control. There was this notion of, authorizing the device before you, connect it to the network, running a posture check on the device, making sure that the device at least have, basic security controls like AV, running on it, installed, running, and up to date. So that kind of started in the early 2000s that we started seeing some traction towards Zero Trust. And in 2010, Gartner coined the term. But I would say the most important moment in history of Zero Trust happened with a breach, with an incident. Some of you might remember 2013, late 13, early 14, this became widely public, an incident called Project Aurora. It's attributed, it's debatable, but it's mostly widely attributed to the Chinese PLA. In 2014, they breached the Google's mainland HQ, right? The operations Google that I have inside China. Some of you might also remember that Google, after this incident, pulled out of China. This led to a seminal paper. I don't want to talk about the political implications of the breach, that's beyond me. But what came out is that the best and brightest minds at Google, the brain trust of Google security, put together a seminal work referred to as today, Beyond Trust. This paper I would say the most seminal paper in Zero Trust came out in 2014 and laid the groundwork for the Zero Trust architecture. And most of the concepts were, detailed, explained, and we were all, as practitioners, vendors, developers, we were given essentially a roadmap by Google's BeyondCorp paper to go out and build more Zero Trust products and solutions and build architectures with the Zero Trust mindset. Most of the solutions that you're going to see around here today, you're going to hear about, I would say, evolved out of the BeyondCorp paper. Besides that, just to quickly recap, Zero Trust goes in two separate tracks. One is very network-centric. I mentioned ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Access. It's a very network-centric view of Zero Trust. But on the other hand, lately I know you've been hearing FIDO2, passkeys, passwordless, right? There's another track of development on Zero Trust on the identity segment. So especially post-pandemic, we were all shelter in place. We were working from home. We were connecting to our personal home Wi-Fi. We're roaming today. We're connecting to our partner and host KS's Wi-Fi network. So network become a lot less meaningful in that sense because we roam all the time. Our devices roam all the time. We roam all the time. Therefore, identity become a much more, I would say, central value proposition, and protecting identity become much more of a central value proposition for Zero Trust. At the same time, again, most of us remember, if you've been in this for 20 plus years, the notion of a security perimeter has evolved. Physical four walls. You enter, you plug in, there's no Wi-Fi signal. You just plug into your Ethernet cable to your laptop, or you have a wired desktop. You're in four walls. That network was considered to be secure, right? You're within the four walls, you're within the perimeter, everything is considered to be secure. That evolved with teleworking becoming a thing, branch offices connecting to HQ and data centers. Now we define the security perimeter with network. The subnets, right, of this IP address, this VLAN become kind of the definition of security. If you are able to get to that VLAN, if you're able to get to that subnet, you're considered to be secure. You're considered to be basically approved for access, right? But now we're talking about, you hear this a lot, identity as the new security perimeter. We come to a point that basically most of our applications, our data moved from on-premises to cloud. That's your CSPs, AWS, Azure, GCP, but even more moved to SaaS applications, right? That's your Microsoft 365, your G Suite, your Salesforce, your NetSuite, your ServiceNow. So with that, identity become essentially the definition of the new perimeter. If you control, if you authenticate, authorize based on user, device, and other forms of identity, which we'll cover in the next slide, that gave you the vector to protect your crown jewels, your most critical assets, your applications, your data. Okay, so just a quick identity 101. When we talk about identity, we mostly think in human identity, user identity terms, right? We have your employees, your contractors, your consultants. You might have cyclical, seasonal employees coming and going. Essentially, this is where we usually think. We think Azure AD or Entra ID now. We think Okta, right? We think Ping. But now there's a lot more momentum because of Zero Trust, actually, behind other forms of identities, machine identities, right? These are your laptops, your mobile devices, your workloads that run in the cloud, the containers. They all have an intrinsic sense of an identity built into them, and we'll talk more about it. Why is it important to think in the terms that devices and workloads and VMs and applications even have identities? And finally, I know most of you are familiar with this, you have service accounts, right? When you deploy an application, a solution, a service, sometimes you need to create a service account on your AD, right? For it to be able to sync with your directory, to be able to poll your users and groups, your policy. So those are actually also forms of identity that we have to think in terms of a successful Zero Trust implementation. And we'll talk about why we have to think about all of these things, and we have to make an inventory of all of these things in order to be successful in deploying a Zero Trust architecture for our business. Okay, but before we get there, why are we even having this conversation? Well, here and there I mentioned the pandemic, I mentioned the on-prem applications moving to public cloud, even more of them moving to SaaS. Because of this, IT and security is now a lot more complex, right? We have distributed users, we have decentralized applications and data, devices and users like us today roam all the time, all over the place. Trusted network, as I mentioned, since the pandemic and shelter in place, it become a lot more evident, is a lot less meaningful. Backhauling all the traffic to the secure network at the office and then releasing it back onto the internet, it didn't scale. We found out that solutions like VPNs and concentrators were meant to be a fraction of our employee base, right? The teleworking guy, the sales guy who travels a lot, it never meant to be 100% of our employee base to be backhauled into the office. So the notion of trusted network perimeter, security perimeter become a lot less meaningful. Apps and applications and data distributed across, again, on-prem, cloud, and SaaS. A lot of us live in a hybrid reality. We talk cloud every day, we talk SaaS every day, but in reality, we do still have legacy applications. We still have in-house applications, quote-unquote customer-native applications that we have to protect, right? They're still on-prem, they're still at the data center. And finally, why we're having a zero trust conversation is attackers basically moved all the attack vectors and all the I would say, best return on investment for an attacker standpoint comes to compromising identities, typically user identities. We'll talk about that as well. But if you look at annual Verizon DBIR, the data breach report, you'll see that large majority, 80% plus of the major data breaches always originate from a compromise of an identity. Therefore, it's important to put zero trust as a roadmap item for your, if not already, you're on that journey, maybe for the next fiscal year's budget to start your zero trust journey, because the complexity can only be handled by, as I said earlier, switching from inherent trust to explicit trust, continuously verifying and authenticating and authorizing your users before they access any of these applications. All right. Please do slow me down, but I know I'm between you and lunch, so I'm going pretty fast. But if you have any questions, raise your hand or tell me to slow down. All right, so what are these principles, zero trust principles? So assume everything is hostile. Again, you're connected to a friendly partner's Wi-Fi network, but NSSID can easily be spoofed. You can just go and put a rogue Wi-Fi device anywhere you want. It could be SFO, it could be the SJC. You can create these fake Wi-Fi hotspots. You name it. You can create all kind of basically impersonation tactics to trick the user into thinking that they're connecting to a trusted network or a trusted environment. There's many, many vectors we'll talk about later, but we need to accept that the threats are always there, always around us. There is no more the notion of that if I'm on this network, even home, right? If I'm on my network, if I'm on my trusted Wi-Fi network, I'm safe, doesn't really scale anymore. And IP cannot establish trust anymore. As we said, the network is a security perimeter. We moved long ago from that. Again, that's the seminal BeyondCorp paper that this really established, because the intrusion that happened in mainland China literally moved all the way to Mountain View, right? So because of that, they stopped trusting IP addresses that are organizational, that's inside a trusted subnet. The assumption becomes that network is hostile, period, and there's no way to secure it. The next one, least privilege. Basically, I would say that the simplest way to look at it is to minimize and right-size the entitlements and the permissions for your users. If an employee is an HR employee, finance employee, they shouldn't need to see other applications. Forget about accessing them. They shouldn't even be visible to them, right? So right-size whatever they need to get the job done. Okay, and finally, and I think this is the most important, I've been kind of repeating this over and over again, is to continuously authenticate and authorize every user and device. Again, just to simplify, what that really means is who can access what when, given what conditions. Okay, moving on. So now let's talk a little bit of practical implementation details, a practical advice that I can give you today on deploying zero trust. I tend to like this seed, sprout, bloom mental model. I know most of you are familiar. And let's follow that for a zero trust initiative, assuming that you might be in the middle of one, you're about to start one. If you already completed one, bear with me, we'll move to more interesting things around use cases later down the road. But let's cover seed, sprout, and bloom for a zero trust initiative. Okay, so at the seed stage, we have to build foundations. This is actually the hardest one, the heavy lifting, right? I'll be honest, we're vendors, we're selling platforms and solutions for you to enable zero trust, but this is the hard work. This is the heavy lifting, right? You have to do before you can even deploy a solution. Do you even know how many SaaS applications are running amok in your organization? Maybe they're shadow IT. Maybe somebody used their Gmail to spin up I don't know, like let's say a Figma instance or Loom or any popular SaaS applications that is not officially sanctioned, it's not tied into your SSO like Entra ID, Azure AD. How many of those are there? Like you have to go talk to your business unit, your branches, and build an inventory of their applications. Be honest with us. We're going to bring everything you need. We're just going to make sure that we do it in a sanctioned and authorized and secure manner. So build an inventory of all your departments and users need when it comes to their applications. I skipped the identity. Actually, it's another important one. I know a lot of us are challenged about this. If you have multiple silos of identity, multiple instances of AD, maybe in different branches, maybe you acquired the company and now you're trying to stitch their user directory into yours, right? Unfortunately, we have to do the work, the painful work, and partners like this could be helpful, I'm sure, to merge those identity silos as much as possible into one. You need to have one source of truth for identity, right? Once we do that, now we can actually centralize with a single identity provider like Entra ID, like Okta, like Ping, and many others I'm forgetting. Going back, inventory all your resources. These are SaaS applications, in-house applications, all the data stores. Then the hard work actually is then to build the policy around them, which means mapping your users and groups, which are all part of your inventory now, to map them to the applications and the resources and the data sources they need to have access. Again, if you build the inventory, now you can build these maps. That's essentially how you build a zero trust policy. The seed stage is going to take a while, right? We did it for Barracuda. We didn't just go in there and turn our Zero Trust Network Access solution or ZTA solution and have Zero Trust day one. No, we have to go talk to every business unit, every development unit, and understand their needs, which applications they use, whether in-house or they're shadow ITing, they're kind of running a pirate ship on the side, that we told them, look, let's have an open conversation, let us bring them on board, let's tie it into our SSO, into our MFA, into our Zero Trust Access product, so that it's all sanctioned, it's all secure, we wouldn't run a risk of breach. That took a long time. Okay, that's the seed one. Well, this is much easier, right? Once you have the inventory of your users, they're all kind of merged into a single directory, a single source of truth for identity. Then you can overlay single sign-on. That's your SAML, that's your OpenID Connect through solutions like Entra ID, Azure AD, and Okta. Then you can do 2FA to start with, and then build on top of that multi-factor authentication. Again, these are relatively easy once you discover your assets and your users and groups and merge them into a single inventory. Then the Zero Trust solution deployment is relatively easy. You can then enable continuous authentication, meaning that you can have timeouts. You can say, my users are going to authenticate every 24 hours, or my users need to authenticate when they have a significant location change, right? A lot of these products, like ours, uses geolocation. In mobile devices, they can tap into GPS to have a more granular location before we prompt you for authentication or maybe 2FA, MFA, additional factors of authentication, right? Since you build your policy, now you can build what's referred to as role-based access control. I like to say role-based access authorization instead. Same thing, who can access what, right? If you're an HR employee, you shouldn't even be able to see the finance-related applications and data stores and databases, right? Just map those out, and the Zero Trust solution will grant explicit access to whoever needs to have access, who have the rights to have access to that application and data source. And this last one, I think, is very important if you are a company that gets audited. You have to have certain compliance requirements in order to operate within your industry. You have to have a system of record. Who access what, when, where, using what device, right? A permanent, retained, ideally at least 5 years, if not forever, system of record for access. You need to have basically, because there might be a breach, right? Security is a process. There is no silver bullet. So there might still be a breach. At least you will have a system of record that you can go back and do forensics on. So that's an important middle sprout stage investment for ZT. Boom, now we're getting fancy. Okay, so we're going to maximize capabilities. This continuous should say contextual, apologies for that, contextual and conditional access. What is contextual? Meaning that there's a critical patch out there, right? There's a malware that's spreading through a vulnerability. there's a nation state attack going on, and your device doesn't have that patch installed, the Zero Trust Access solution will deny you access. It's contextual. It understands that you don't have the critical patch installed. That is mandated by your security organization. They give you a 48-hour window, 24-hour, whatever it is, but you still don't have it installed. We all do that. Remember the pop-up, update your device, remind me in a week, remind me in 2 days, right? Sometimes at some point, the policy will enforce that. So that's the contextual and conditional access. If you don't have the critical patch, your EDR stopped working. Maybe you have admin rights on your device. You got annoyed and you shut it down. Well, guess what? You're not going to get access to Salesforce suddenly because it needs to be running part of your security policy. It's mandated by your security organization. Now, we mentioned on the identity slide things like FIDO2, passkeys, passwordless authentication becoming very popular for good reason. They are phishing resistant. We have a couple slides on the use case side of the conversation that we'll go over. But as your bloom stage, maximizing Zero Trust capabilities of your Zero Trust platform, you can also now turn on, basically flipping a switch at that point, passwordless access. And then there's these IGA, identity governance and access kind of use, administration kind of use cases around permission request workflows, right? You need to, some of these Zero Trust solutions will automate access. Like, oh, I need access to Zoom. I need access to this S3 bucket in AWS, right? All of these can be actually built into workflows, automation workflows by your Zero Trust solution. Again, you're maximizing capabilities. It's that ideal state. It's tough to get there, but eventually, as you go through the Zero Trust roadmap and the initiative, you can find yourself automating requests around accessing applications and data. Identity lifecycle management, again, this is a very common problem that we all deal with. Zero Trust solutions help you a lot with this. Onboarding, joiners, movers. An employee that happened to be at sales is now at marketing, right? Or sales engineer is now at marketing. Well, they're movers. They need to abandon all these technical permissions and entitlements that they have. They have access to resources at Azure, right? Why do they need to take that with them to marketing? So joiners, onboarding, granting them access, giving them access to their email, to all the applications they need to get the job done, the objective, right? But also once they move between departments, you need to right-size their permission, dropping the ones that belong to another role, and then recreating those. And finally, one of the most important, because a lot of breaches happen because of that, leavers, offboarding. Are you successfully offboarded the employee that's leaving? Did you take away all the permissions? Are there anything lingering? Are there sessions that might be still open on there, even though you disabled the user on Azure AD, Entra ID, but there's maybe an access token that's good for 2 weeks? What happens to that one, right? If they refresh the browser, do they still get access before they return their laptop, for example? So those are basically the final, I would say, the glamorous phase of Zero Trust. You can terminate an employee and they will lose access to everything immediately. All of those, since all your identities are tied into one central location, you can do it in one go. And again, if you're part of a compliance regime, access reviews. Every quarter, you have to look in who have access to what. Should they still have access to the same resource and applications and data? Again, do we need to right size? You have to generate this report and send it to your auditors. So Zero Trust solutions will help you with that. All right, I would say now we're going to talk a bit more about the technical details or more the use cases, which I consider to be the more useful bits when it comes to why deploy a Zero Trust solution. All right, first we're going to start with Zero Trust access. We dropped the network, the N, because now Zero Trust access spans to applications that are in the cloud, that are as SaaS, or that are on premises. So we don't really look at it from a network standpoint. Although we go ahead and replace a networking solution called VPN Concentrator. Most of you remember we had Symantec, right? We had the signature-based AV. We were standard McAfee with Symantec, those were the kings in the valley, right? But what happened? We transitioned to EDR. Now CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, you hear them in every endpoint security-related conversation. We went through a refresh cycle on the endpoint security landscape. Well, guess what? We're having the same exact refresh cycle when it comes to remote access. We're moving away from VPNs that have a ton of problems, which we will talk now, into something much more robust and much more secure. These are the Zero Trust access solutions. So what are the problems with VPN? Why do we even bother? Why are we rip and replacing? Which I don't suggest, by the way. I would suggest a gradual transition, picking a focus group, or finding highly risky users like contractors and switching them over to Zero Trust access before completely ripping and replacing your VPN. But why are we even having this conversation about VPN? VPNs are insecure. They teleport a remote user into the network, right? You might tell me that, oh, well, we could have firewalling capabilities, we can put them in VLANs segments, but still, this never gets done. Usually they get teleported into a flat network. If not, they share the same subnet, the same network with other VPN clients, so they can infect each other, or they can literally move from one endpoint to another endpoint. So the microsegmentation notion of VPN doesn't exist. It's bolted later down the road. With Zero Trust, you have it by design. Every access from a user to an application is in a microsegmentation session. It's a standalone tunnel between the user and his or her device to an application. Okay, another problem with VPNs, they don't continuously check device posture. You're familiar with some of the well-known VPNs. They will do a device posture check like a NAC at the very beginning when you're signing on, before you connect. They don't, in the background, continuously evaluate that posture. You have your EDR running, your EPP running, Sentinel-1 shows tick, everything is good, Carbon Black is running, and then you connect, you turn it off, or it gets disabled, whatever. They don't continuously check the device posture. This is something that's baked into Zero Trust solutions. They continuously pull on these attributes of your laptop, of your mobile device, and if anything changes, based on the policy, I'm not saying automatically, but based on the policy, they might tear down your sessions. You went and disabled the firewall. You went ahead and disabled your EDR. Guess what? You might lose access immediately. Okay, cumbersome. If you have dealt with deploying and operationalizing VPNs, you know what I'm saying. I don't need to get into too much details, but during the pandemic, one thing became very evident. I don't really need to sell you hard on this, but VPNs, again, were, remember the conversations, they ask you about concurrency. How many users do you think is going to hit your VPN concentrate at any given time, right? Is it 5%, 10% of your employee base? Well, when you have a shelter-in-place order handed over to you, now 100% of your employees are hitting the VPN. Good luck keeping it up, right? So we found that out during the pandemic, that VPNs were never provisioned from a performance standpoint, from a throughput standpoint, for 100% of your employee base. And they're not ready for the cloud. What I mean by that, I'll give you a quick analogy here. If you have multi-cloud deployments, you have some workloads in Azure, some VMs in Azure, some in Google, some in AWS, or if you have multiple regions, how do you go using a VPN between those VPCs and VNet? Typically, you have to disconnect from one, connect to another one, and think about an engineer, a DevOps employee doing it all day, every day, continuously switching between VPNs and VNets and on-prem and data center. It becomes a UX, a usability nightmare, right? So with that, ZTA solutions are really custom tailored for simultaneous access to all your cloud workloads and cloud VPCs and VNets at the same time. You don't need to switch between them. You don't need to waste time re-authenticating, going through device posture. All of these things continuously happen in the background. Your users are not disrupted with new authentication schemes, workflows, or new device posture checks. It continuously happens in the background. Okay. Just to wrap it up, with Zero Trust access, you essentially get role-based access control, who can access what, right? And only that set of applications, nothing more. You get passwordless authentication. In the case when you replace your VPN, you're actually not just going to build a secure solution for remote access, you're also going to delight your users. You have the opportunity to be their champion. Why? VPNs time out. You need to switch between sites. You need to re-authenticate. You have to wait for any connect to do a device posture analysis. None of these things will stop them, slow them down anymore, okay? It just happens in the background. With passwordless authentication, they don't need to enter username and password. They don't need to re-authenticate, being redirected and being federated to Entra ID. It just happens seamlessly, all in the background with Zero Trust access solutions. So really, really improves user happiness, and it usually delights them. I would say that's the most important. I recap a lot of these, so I'll pass, but most of ZTA solutions are application agnostic. Even if you have some legacy application, you're using 3CX for your voice over IP, telephonic, applications, right? that's fine. They do have the means to tunnel UDP, TCP, mixed bag of protocols, all again seamlessly from the endpoints to wherever these solutions run. You should ask your vendors about this. This is important. Are your ZTNA solutions, ZTA solution application agnostic? Can it run legacy? Can it run fat clients that runs on Windows, Java applications? This is an important question to address, but most good ones will take care of that for you. All right, the next use case. Okay, so this is about contractors. Remember I mentioned briefly, you start with a focus group. Focus groups could be the ones that have the biggest needs for remote access, or it could be the most dangerous for the organizational attack surface, for the organizational risk, let's say, okay? So contractors happen to be one. I'll give you one actual example. I believe it goes back to 2017. Whether it's Wipro or Infosys. It's good that I don't remember which one, so I'm not pointing fingers. I'm pointing fingers to general direction. Got compromised, okay? They were a contractor to a large number of gift card printing and production companies, right? These are your iTunes cards, your Visa gift cards, you name it, your Macy's gift cards. I think 4 or 5 of them got compromised because the contractor got compromised first. What we call this island hopping. You compromise a contractor, somebody in the supply chain, they have a persistent VPN access to the network in order to get, to work, in order to do the job that they were hired for. Well, I believe it was Infosys, or actually, let me check my notes. Wipro, I bet. Through them, they basically breached these gift card printing businesses. So in that case, if you're giving contractors access through VPN, this is really a security anti-pattern at this point. You are opening up risks that this endpoint on the contractor side might have been compromised. And in fact, that was the case. The contractor's endpoint compromised, you have no visibility. You cannot enroll them on your MDM or RMM solution. You don't collect posture telemetry from their devices. You have no visibility. They're basically almost like your employees' BYOD personal devices, right? So this become a major risk. Contractor compromised device basically teleporting inside your organization. Well, what did we do? Instead, we just tried to hot patch this problem by putting what's called the bastion hosts or jump servers, right? So the contractor device goes through the firewall. There's some amount of inspection here, I would say very superficial, and then they come to a bastion host. From the bastion host, they can only access a set of applications. But this, again, didn't really scale. I don't see a major problem here. If it's done right, the bastion host can limit what they can access, so they won't have the visibility for the rest of the network. It becomes more of a maintenance and operational issue. Who really want to deal with bastion hosts and keeping them up to date, making sure that they're always updated and the policy is correct? New contractors get it onboarded, new contractors getting offboarded, right? So how do you deal with it in a seamless fashion? Again, Zero Trust, one of the top use cases I would say is onboarding and offboarding contractors. And it's not just about securing their access to the applications that they need, also putting them on a timer. How long are they going to be with us, right? I onboarded, you send them an enrollment email. They click on the email enrollment link or scan the QR code. They download your application or they go through some sort of an attestation process on a web-based interface. They're onboarded, they can access your internal resources. We have one customer in finance. Their auditors use us to access internal finance-related data sets, right, and applications. Well, you put them on a policy that expires when the contractor is done. Is it a 2-week engagement, 4-week, 3-month engagement, whatever? Most Zero Trust access solutions has the notion of when, meaning what time of the day. Are they accessing on a Sunday? That doesn't make sense. It's not part of the policy. It should be within working hours where our security operations centers in activity, or there's IT folks are actually monitoring the systems, and you can say, what is the duration of access? So most Zero Trust access solution has built that functionality bolted on at the very core. Okay, just to recap, put them, onboard them, offboard them in a very easy fashion. Time cap their access, when the duration runs out, when their engagement time run out. And here's another interesting one, actually. The ZTNA solution I'm in charge of has actually a means for the contractor to ask the company to extend their access. They got access denied. On the access denied, it says, you run out of your time, policy dictates that you cannot access beyond this October 12, right? You can say, ask for 2 more weeks, ask for 1 more day, and then it comes in front of the administrator. If they approve, your access is granted again. So a lot of these really streamlines contractor access. All right, secure access to SaaS applications. Why do we need to secure access to SaaS? Why does it matter? Well, because turns out it's one of the critical targets, one of the most lucrative targets for criminals and for nation-state actors in general, because it's easy to phish, right? SaaS applications can be easily impersonated. You can build landing pages. There are actually open source projects like Evil Engine X that you can very efficiently as an attacker operate what we refer to as, let me go to that slide, adversary in the middle attacks. So what happens is that your employee, and I'll show you a couple examples. In the one example that we have here is a Twilio getting breached through an SMS-based phishing. An employee gets a link talking about the timesheet that you need to go and adjust because you're on call or whatever. It's believable. It's a good narrative that they built on the text message. You clicked on the link, it's a link to Okta, but it's a fake link. It's something-okta.com, right? They were able to squat the domain. The domain didn't get pulled for weeks, actually. It stayed active. The ICANN process or whoever's in charge of reclaiming these fraudulent domains runs a while. So then the employee clicked on the SMS link. They hit the attacker's proxy, which basically handholds the entire flow of the authentication. From that fake Okta domain, they take you to the real Okta domain where you authenticate to your SaaS applications. Well, what's the problem here, right? The problem is that you enter your username and password. They see that doesn't matter. Why? Because you have MFA, you have TOMFA, right? That's perfectly fine. But once your user then sees the screen for your 2FA to enter .p, those numbers, they relay that too. Once your users approve the MFA on their phone, guess what? This session is now active, and all they need to steal is the session token. The authentication token, typically it's a JWT, and then they can replay it on their side. If you go to Chrome's developer tools, you can basically copy-paste somebody else's authentication token into your session, and immediately your Salesforce, your NetSuite turns into their session, right? That's exactly what they did in the case of the Cisco and the Okta breaches. So Microsoft warns us about this. There's been active attacks going on, I believe, since September 2021. There's been an active adversary in the middle phishing attacks targeting Microsoft 365 inboxes, right? Starting with the inbox, and then they laterally move from there to Teams and others. Some more metrics from Microsoft. 382,000 attacks that are reported to be MFA fatigue. What is that? I didn't clarify what MFA fatigue is. So once an employee gets phished, you might have their username and password, right? But you can't coerce them. You're not physically next to them to hit approve on their device. While in some of these breaches that we will talk about, they got overwhelmed by continuous approval requests on their Okta Verify, on their Microsoft Authenticator, and eventually they say, damn it, go away, hit approve, and then that's it. They didn't see any more push notifications overwhelming their phone. I mean, one person was actually describing that the phone heat up because of the amount of MFA push notifications that this person was getting. Now Microsoft throttled them down, right? You cannot send millions of them heating up and buzzing the phone off the table. Doesn't happen anymore, but that was one of the person who got phished described it as the phone got like non-stop push notifications till he relented and hit approve while attackers gain access. Okay, so this has a 35% success rate, but you know what? They only need one. Then from there on, they can laterally move. Okay, what do I mean by that? So we had the Cisco incident, which happened through, okay, so sorry, I'm apparently starting with a Twilio incident, which I mentioned, started with a text message. You see, this is kind of interesting. Most of your users, if you can see, I know it's small, but it's twilio-okta.com. Most of your users don't know the difference between a dash and a period inside a domain name. They don't know. Ask them. If it's twilio-okta.com, it's a legitimate domain that you can buy, right? But if it was twilio.okta.com, you cannot get that. It's a tenant that belongs to Twilio, but most users won't be able to notice that it's a dash and a period. They don't know the difference. They don't understand the context of it. Your non-technical employee doesn't know what a subdomain is, right? So they're going to click on that. In the case of Cisco, this is actually the MFA fatigue incident that this user got username and password phished, and they continuously got bombarded. Some people call it carpet bombing, I guess as an analogy, but with the MFA approval request, the authentication request, and they eventually relented, which led to VPN access into the Cisco network. And this is the latest one. We've been briefed by our CISO about this. This is the MGM, the recent one, and this is even worse. This is voice phishing. They literally pick up the phone, ask IT help desk to reset their password and to port their multi-factor authentication to a new device because I lost it. I happened to lose it. I'm stranded, I got robbed, whatever the story was. It was believable and amazing because it was, actors, cyber criminals from Russia. I don't know how they figure out, native, the language barrier, I don't know how they overcome, but they were able to convince IT help desk to reset the password and port the MFA to a new device. And the rest is history. MGM was completely down and out. Okay, so timing-wise, we're almost out. So I'll wrap it up by saying that, this is kind of from less secure to more secure on your authentication stack, technology stack. We all started here. Then we have that .p, right? You have to enter that 6, 7, 9, whatever digits to complete your authentication flow. Now we have push to auth with our, Microsoft Authenticator, Okta Verify, and finally we're in the age of passwords authentication through passkeys, through FIDO2 compliant protocols, where you can use device-based certificates that are stored in the SCP, the secure enclave of your device, or the TPM of your device to authenticate you without bothering your users with the username, password, pulling their phone, entering the number, or hitting approve. All of these kind of melt away and disappear. Okay. This is how it kind of looks like. You make some configurations, and all your users see is a device-level authorization. That's all. They say, you go to Salesforce, you see a little glimpse of device posture analysis and authorizing the device, which means that they're pulling the certificate from the device's keychain, verifying it cryptographically that it's a trusted device. Boom, you're into Salesforce, you're into whatever NetSuite, whatever SaaS application you need access. All right, I'm wrapping up, promise. This is the last slide. Okay, step one, let's evaluate where we are in our journey to zero trust. Let's talk to our partners, right? Let's talk to KIs and folks, wonderful folks that can help you advance in that journey. If you're at the beginning, in the middle, whichever stage, seed or sprout. Step two, let's have an honest conversation with our IT stakeholders about our crown jewel applications and our shadow IT applications. Let them come out. I use this application, whatever the new popular SaaS is, to be more productive. Let's get it on our inventory. Let's get it onboarded with our SSO. Let's overlay MFA so we have our controls on top of it. Please go ahead and benchmark and explore zero trust access solutions. There's a lot of them out there. One tip I can give you, look for not standalone ones, because then you're going to have to add bolt-on other solutions, yet another standalone web security solution, standalone other network CASB solution. Instead, I would suggest to look for zero trust access as part of a greater platform. If you heard SASE, that's a newly popularized concept by Gartner. Buy zero trust through a platform offering. Okay, I'll skip all this stuff and say, oops. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right.
So now